Hello, thank you for joining me on this first of this week's lecture videos. Over the coming modules, we will be taking a good amount of time for looking at the cardiovascular system. This important system, which is made of a few different parts, if you will, is going to be covered in a few different sections. On this module, we will cover the blood. You can imagine it as the transport media for the materials carried throughout the body by the system. Without blood, the other parts of the system would be obsolete. Then we will look at the heart. It can be characterized with an analog of a pump that drives all of the transport media, which is of course the blood topic of this module. Finally, we will also look at the tubing of this system. This is of course the blood vessels. These include arteries, capillaries, and veins. To get us oriented with the topic of this talk, the blood, let's take one step backwards and recall what we learned about our four main tissue types back in our earlier courses. Well, these four main tissue types were of course epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. My question for you is, which of these tissue types do you think that the blood is? If you pick the connective tissue, well done. Blood is indeed a special type of connective tissue. Of course, we note that it is much more fluid and liquidy than bone or cartilage or tendons or ligaments, but still, it is grouped within connective tissues. I think that at this point, it is a good idea to define what blood is. This is a rather good yet simple definition. Blood provides us the transport media that circulates within the cardiovascular system. So the heart pumps the blood, which travels within this closed loop one-way system made of blood vessels. Good job with this one. Next, I would like us to discuss just briefly about the clinical relevance of blood as it relates to what we will be looking at this chapter. And that is, of course, drawing the blood from a patient in order to get a blood sample for laboratory analysis of its contents. To achieve this, we must spin the sample. So why is spinning stage so important? Well, this process of spinning separates the various components of the blood into distinct layers. And this is really a standard and a fairly inexpensive clinical test to do. The analysis of blood gives information on many things about the patient, such as providing insight about the condition of urinary system, kidney health, immune system, hormones, which we just talked about in our last module, and so on. In fact, the analysis of blood plays a major role in a clinical decision-making in the most modern medicine. One recent paper that I looked at suggested that approximately 70% of clinical decision-making in medicine relies on the blood test results. Let's talk a little more about the blood and note some general things that we should be familiar with. First, how much blood do you think that there is within you? This is typically approximately 8% of your weight, which makes it, on an average individual, roughly 5 liters. That is about 1.3 US liquid gallons for those of you who do not prefer metric system. Now, let's talk about the functions of blood. So the 3 that I want to highlight here especially are: firstly, blood's role as a transport media. Remember, oxygen and carbon dioxide are carried in the blood to and from the lungs and tissues of the body. Also, nutrients that are for the cellular metabolism and resulting waste products are carried by the blood. And not to forget what we just talked about in the last module, the endocrine system. So hormones too are carried in blood. Why won't we have a look of the next one? Blood plays a major role in regulation too. Some of the examples that I thought here are fluid balance, which is regulated by the blood if there is too much or too little. And heat regulation as well. Water, with most of the blood being water, is good at transporting heat. I also thought about the body's pH as an example. Note within how narrow range of pH, 7.35 to 7.45, our blood is maintained. It is really remarkable, I would say. And the final function that I would like to mention is protective role of the blood. One good example is the immune system cells traveling within the blood. These are known as the white blood cells. Another one that is personal to me is the blood clotting. So thanks to the clotting mechanism of the blood, we are able to regulate the bleeding, for example, from a cut. This also helps us to safeguard against the entry of foreign materials through a puncture of the skin. And this all happens thanks to the blood clotting mechanism. So there you have it, 3 important functions of the blood. That completes our first lecture video on the topic of blood. I hope that this short video has served as an introduction to the cardiovascular system and the place of blood in it. We also had a look of the 3 major functions of blood, so I hope that you see it as important as I do. Thank you for your company throughout this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next clip.